Title: The Echo of Yesterday. In the sleepy town of Eldermoor, time was a concept both cherished and feared. Locals whispered that time flowed differently here, entwined with the fate of each resident. They shared stories about the Woods of Wist, a dense forest that bordered Eldermoor, believed to be a boundary between realms. Many warned against venturing too close, cautioning that once you crossed its threshold, you might never return, or worse, you might return unchanged. Jenny, an ambitious young journalist, had recently moved to Eldermoor, eager to uncover its secrets for her new podcast, Unveiling the Unseen. Her friends had forewarned her of the town's peculiarities, but excited by the prospect of a good horror story, she brushed them off. Ignoring the unsettling tales, Jenny ventured toward the Woods of Wist, armed with only a voice recorder and her fearless curiosity. The sun began to set as Jenny stepped into the shadows of the trees. An eerie silence enveloped her, as if the woods held their breath. Her heart raced, but she pressed on, believing she was the brave heroine of her own tale. A chill brushed against her skin, and she shivered, realizing she was utterly alone. Not wanting to turn back so soon, she wandered deeper, weaving through towering trees that seemed to whisper secrets in a language all their own. Hours passed like moments, and as she delved deeper, time lost all meaning. The light dimmed, casting sinister shadows that danced at the edges of her vision. The air turned thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. Suddenly, Jenny heard a rustling behind her. She spun around, heart thundering, but found nothing but the sinister silence that hung over the woods. Panic flared in her chest as she retraced her steps, but the path she thought she had followed was gone. Twisted branches loomed like gnarled fingers, and all familiar markers had faded into the otherworldly gloom. The realization hit her: she was lost. As she stumbled deeper, she stumbled upon an ancient clearing bathed in the dappled light of a ghostly moon. In the center stood an enormous, gnarled tree, its bark twisted into an unsettling grimace. Carved into its trunk were strange symbols that seemed to pulse with each beat of her heart. Intrigued, she approached and touched the cool surface, feeling a jolt of energy shoot through her. In that moment, time stopped. The night grew eerily silent, and a stillness enveloped her as if the world had drawn a breath and held it. A sudden pulse of light flickered, and with it, the feeling of vertigo washed over Jenny. Unfolding memories flooded her mind, disorienting her. She felt herself slipping through moments in time, each one trapped in the eerie woods, each visage of the same terror-stricken traveler wandering aimlessly, lost to the night. Each time she attempted to leave the woods, time rewound. She found herself back at the foot of the tree, forced to relive the afternoon over and over. She tried different paths and desperate cries tore from her throat, but every time, she would find herself returning to that same gruesome clearing, facing the same dire fate. Weeks faded into unfamiliar loops of dread. Jenny's only companions were echoes of her own screams and the elusive shadows of past wanderers, now mere wraiths trapped in the woods. Their eyes, hollow and despaired, told stories of failed attempts to escape. She realized their presence was a mirror reflecting her own descent into madness. Each iteration twisted her reality, stripping away her memories of home. Familiar voices, the taste of her favorite coffee, even the beloved face of her younger sister faded into an elusive dream. Her days intertwined with tormenting whispers of her past, luring her back to the memory of when she first entered the woods. When Jenny finally snapped, she stood against the colossal tree, her body shaking. With every ounce of strength left in her, she screamed a defiance against the darkness, promising she would break the cycle. That's when the ground beneath her trembled, and the ancient bark shuddered at her indignant cry. A chilling voice, echoing like the wind, answered, "You veered off the path. You sought secrets but lost yourself. The woods demand their due." Quote, in that moment, the tree split open, revealing a black void swirled with fragments of time. Every cycle replayed in flashes before her eyes, and she could see the lost souls staring back, trapped, desperate, and longing for release. Understanding their plight, Jenny took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and stepped into the darkness. When she awoke, sunlight poured through her window, casting a warm glow across her room. Confused, Jenny sat up, throwing her legs over the bed and gripping her head. Had it all been a nightmare? The intoxicating fragrance of coffee wafted through the air, and her heart quickened. She crept towards the kitchen. She would ask her sister if they could rediscover the world together, away from haunting memories and the consuming shadows. Yet, as she stepped out into the familiar living room, she caught a glimpse of herself reflected in the mirror. The pale eyes shadowed by past horrors and an echoing voice still ringing in the distance, reminding her that the woods would always be waiting, ready to encapsulate another curious soul. And just as she turned to the kitchen, she heard a familiar whisper, slithering into her mind, "You can never truly leave the echo of yesterday."